Thank you for staying with Monday Special. Our hashtag is Monday Special KE, or you can talk to us using the SMS number 22422. We're talking about fathers raising children, and specifically asking, how do men cope after the death of a spouse in a society where men are encouraged to remain strong in the face of grief? Tonight on Monday Special, we'll speak to fathers that are raising their children after the death of the mothers of their children, sharing their stories tonight. With me here in studio, I'm joined by Ted Josiah, who is a pioneer music producer. Ted lost his wife last year, that's Regina Qatar, after a short illness. Thanks for being with us, Ted.
Thank you very much.
We're also joined by George Ekua, who's an entrepreneur. George also lost his wife last year. George's wife was media personality Janet Kanini Akua, who lost a brave fight with lung cancer. Thanks for being with us, George. And we're also joined by Moffat Cargo, who is a counselor. He's the founder and clinical director of ProCare Counselors, an organization that offers psychosocial support to individuals, families, and corporate institutions. And he's also a lecturer at the Pan-African University. Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Once again, just inviting you to continue sending in your respective stories for those of you that are fathers that are raising your children on your own. And I'll just take two messages here before we get on to the conversation. Somebody is saying, I am Mazembe Super One of the single parents. My wife died in the year 2014 after a short illness. I was left with 3 children. The last one is 1 year old. Well, the last one was 1 year old and is now 13 years. And I feel okay in the 13 years of single parent life. Ask me why. And he says that he is so proud of raising his child by himself. Somebody is saying, my brother lost his wife to breast cancer 22 years ago, left a 4-year-old boy and a preterm baby girl. Through the grace of God, the boy is a young man who has cleared university, and the girl is studying medicine at Chiromo campus. Please continue sharing with us. Ted, I'll begin with you. First of all, our condolences to you for your loss. Let's begin with how the death of your loved one impacted your family life, and specifically you as a father having to fit into that role as both mom and dad to Gummy Bear. You call her Gummy Bear?
Yeah, I call her Gummy Bear. Well, it was, for us it came as a very big surprise, because we didn't know she was unwell until we took her to hospital that evening, and 2 hours later she had passed. So I'm only coming to terms with the fact that she's gone like now, because there was no warning signs, no nothing. But luckily we had really planned for Gummy Bear. And we had anticipated that we wanted to have a child, we wanted to have a happy child, and we wanted to make sure that we had put everything in place for the child to have joy. So when people see the child smiling, it's not that she's a smiley child or anything. It's, I tell people, you make your child what you want your child to be. So every morning when she wakes up, there's an ugly man looking down at her, smiling at her, and obviously she's going to laugh back, and people think she's smiling, but she's thinking, oh God, do I have to put up with that ugly face for the rest of my life? And coming to terms with it and coping with it has been hard. Luckily, I've got a small but very strong support system who came and wrapped themselves around me, literally. People who I didn't even know we were that close really came within the first month and really supported me. And if it wasn't for them, I think I would have just crumbled.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the support system very shortly. Jay, that's the name of your daughter?
Jamila.
Jamila. How old was she when you call her Jay? So
yeah, Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old was she when her mom passed on? Was she at a tender age, and what feelings are going through your mind at that time in terms of how to now step in terms of diapers? She's a breastfeeding child at that time. So take us back to that moment, specifically how old she was and your initial reaction to having to be the one that will be taking care of her.
Her mom woke up with a massive headache. I gave the mom painkillers. She throws them up. I ask her to get into the car. She walks downstairs into the car, and then she says, I can't hold the baby, so you're going to have to hold the baby. I don't have a car seat at this point. So I am holding the baby and driving to hospital and speaking to my wife so that she stays, you know, with me. And we get to hospital a couple of hours later. I'm holding the child, expecting that, you know, they're going to make arrangements, set up a room for her, and this must be cerebral malaria or something. You know, I've already done my own diagnosis. And 2 hours later, I'm holding the child, and the doctor comes and tells me, your wife has passed. The last thing she told me was, I can't hold the child, you take care of the child. Sorry, I didn't get to say goodbye. She didn't get to say goodbye. We didn't have a conversation about this. It was and still is very difficult, even just thinking about, because I was holding that baby wondering, what am I going to do with Jay? You know? Yes, I'm ready to be her dad. That was the plan, but I wasn't ready to be her dad and her mom. And for me, her mom was, she was my support system. She was the one who was always saying, well, I think you have this condition, so I'm going to cook this food for you. And, you know, she was the one who was always taking care of me. And all of a sudden, I've got nobody to take care of me, and I've got to take care of this little girl.
Who is at this time how old?
3 months.
3 months.
She had just turned 3 months. We had just celebrated that.
Okay. I'll get back to you, Ted, with more on that. George, for you, your story was published quite a bit before the death of Janet, your wife. Your children, 4 years and 7 years respectively, these are children that are able to now ask questions like, where is ma'am? And you know, a lot of questions surrounding mommy. For you, having had to, of course, prepare yourself for the fact that you might lose your wife and then eventually having to live through that experience, having now to take on the role of being mom and dad to the kids, walk us through that journey up to now, and indeed the questions, some of the innocent questions that children ask, and what your answer would be immediately they asked you that.
Yeah, the questions. My kids, 7 and 4. The 4-year-old is the extrovert, really outgoing, bubbly, very innocent. During this journey, I've realized the innocence of the children. The funny thing is, it's us adults who get over affected by the question. The child is actually asking because she's trying to come to terms with. She doesn't make sense to her. I've had some very painful ones. I've had some hilarious ones. One time, my daughter goes to Sunday school and everything, and comes and says, the teacher said God is all powerful and God is everywhere and he can do anything. And she asks me, is it true God is all powerful? I say yes. And he says, can he do anything? I say yes. So then tell mommy to come down for 2 days. I'm like, what? He says, yeah, tell him. And you have to tell her it's not like that. And what happens is that at the beginning, the questions are more talk to, you know, like I would tell her things like, if you pray, you'll talk to mom. Then she says, okay, you pray. Then I said, okay. Then she tells me, then tell her to come in your prayer. Then I'll tell her, no, it doesn't work like that. She says, okay, I want to pray and talk to her. Then she prays, and then she says, I can't hear her. And it's the innocence of a child is based on a lot of, so it's a huge internal debate, trying to explain to a child about the spirit world. And for her, she kept on asking me, where was I before I was born? And so you're in heaven. So then she says, so that's where mommy is. So can I go back?
Yeah.
It's really not missing her. I mean, it's missing her, but it's really trying to understand, can I talk to her one more time? So it's very, those are the kind of difficult questions, and really you have to, one of the ways I've dealt with it is just don't lie. I've stopped creating mythical solutions, or it's really just to engage that it's not happening, it's not going to happen. For the boy, he's older one, he was the one who was much closer to the mom. He doesn't do the questions, and that's the harder one. That's the harder one, where he will rather tell his teachers and try to put a brave face for me. And I used to think he was so brave or so calm. And the other day I went for a parents-teacher conference, and the teacher told me that every time it rains, he says he goes very sad. And the teacher asked him why, and says when it would rain, his mom would be asleep, and he always imagines her sleeping. So it's a lot to deal with, but I always say, while it's a lot to deal with for me when I see the sadness in my children, I think it's much huger for them to deal with, because I grew up with a mother. My mom is still alive, and they will never know a mother's touch. And for me, that's my drive with them. It's a crazy journey, I won't lie, trying to fill in their shoes and trying to manage them emotionally. But what I've learned through a lot of successes and mistakes in my 9 months or 10 months or so has been, I have to be the primary source of love, as he says. I have to be the primary source of joy. You cannot outsource this thing. So there's an idea that our support system will come to give the love and whatever, while they're good. It is supporting love or supporting this, but you have to be the primary source, and that is what will calm the questions and what will let them start to answer that, and also reassure them heavily that you're not going, because they keep asking, are you in heaven? I say, we'll go one day when I'm very old. And they say, when are you going? And you have to keep reassuring them on this.
Reassurance. Ted, back to you. Talking about a support system and who you allow, you spoke about having a very close circle and not just letting anybody close. In terms of gauging and in terms of selecting or even being comfortable with the people that are giving you assurance and that are lending a helping hand. You're very active on social media, and I see a lot of support coming your way. A lot of people empathizing with your situation, a lot of people sending you encouraging messages. For you, how do you gauge between opportunists, for instance? You do have female friends and male friends as well. Who do you know and who are you comfortable knowing is around you during this period of extreme pain and still, self-searching and soul-searching? Who is your biggest support system right now?
I've kept it down to a friend of mine and his wife. Literally, it's just two people with the nanny who really help with when things get bad. We had always planned, my wife and I, to make sure we bring up Jay, just the two of us. So I still intentionally want to keep it that way. My nanny, for instance, is not a sleep-in nanny. She comes in at 8 in the morning, and as soon as I come back from work, she's out the door. So I take the shift. And I want to keep it that way. On the weekends, the nanny's not there, I've got to take care of Jay myself. And it's not just taking care of Jay, it's developing a relationship with her, so that she doesn't think that, oh, today there's this person, and then tomorrow there's this person, and then the next day there's this person. It's all right when visitors come, but I also have made sure that I really limit that so that she has some consistency in her life. Because people assume that she's young, so she doesn't know that her mom is gone, or she doesn't remember that she had a mom. And the other day I shot a video of her looking at her mom's picture and her actually talking to that picture. It shocked me that this 6-month-old child can relate to who that is and start having a conversation with that picture. And it made me realize that I really need to keep her huddled in a corner where she doesn't see too many people around her and then get confused, because then that can also make her assume that love is for everyone. You can just give yourself to people, which also you don't want a girl child to feel that. You want a girl child to know that I've got a rock who's my dad, and if I'm looking for a relationship later on in life, it's not going to be free willy, it's going to be about finding a rock.
Talking about this being a girl child, and Dr. I'll come to you, particularly for the teenage girls who are being raised by fathers. Talking about this being a girl child, Ted, what are some of the things that you're struggling with as a dad raising a girl? What are some of the things that you find a little bit awkward?
I don't find anything awkward, but I know a lot of men find it awkward to wash the girl. I know a lot of men would find it awkward to have to change the diaper and make sure that, you make sure the girly parts are all right and there's no, nasty stuff happening there. People don't like talking about it. And I'm like, you know what? If you have chosen to be a dad, guess what? You don't know whether you're going to have a boy or a girl. You don't know if your wife is going to be there or not there. And you don't know if you're going to be the live-in dad. You might have a wife who's working and you're the dad at home, stay-at-home dad, So just fold your sleeves, get into it, deal with it. Because the girl will look for the man who closest resembles her dad in his manners. So be the man that you want for your daughter.
For your daughter.
Yeah.
To you, George, in terms of support system for you, who has that been, and how do you deal with that very thin line between relegating daddy duties to the nanny or to your mom or to your aunt or whoever it is that's taking care of the children, as you also seek healing? How have you ensured that that delicate balance is well taken care of so that you're still present for your children and for you, who is your support system?
Good question, because mine has morphed. I've made some good judgment, some bad judgment, and there are a lot of lessons. When I started out, my core support system was our nanny of 8 years, and who had literally seen his kids from childhood, from birth to now. Other than that was their godmother and my sister. That was really the core support system. And out of the blue, towards the end of November, clearly I'm a blind man, my nanny declared to me that she's pregnant.
Wow.
And I can tell you, over and above what had been saying, that I had outsourced, because I'd gotten used to, when we were married, she was taking care of the child. So I would naturally assume, as long as she's the children, they are okay, and I would step out and go and do about my healing, and you try and come to terms with it. But what that does is that the only thing that will make this thing work is you forming a bond with these kids. And now suddenly, the core person, in terms of the home, the one who washes them, gets them ready, is gone.
It's gone, yeah.
I even offered to tell her, look at this, move in with your child, your husband, everyone, just all of you, I'll raise all of you. And she said, her husband said, how are we going to live under another man's roof? So, back at one. And I went to a bureau and got the craziest 21-year-old nanny who survived the whole 2 days. And I knew it was a reboot. It was horrible. So I ended up at one point almost breaking down. It can get really overwhelming. Two little kids can get really overwhelming. And out of luck, a friend of mine who had a nanny for 7 years, actually a godmother, then brought back a nanny who has worked out well since January, and I have a feeling we're going to. But what I'm doing different this time is that I'm not letting her be in charge of the emotional support. Before I had said, nanny, you're the one who makes the kids laugh. Now it's me. So every day, little things, like what he's saying. One day I just walk in the house and say, today I'm the one washing you guys. I tell guys, today scrap the menu. I'm the one cooking with you. Today, little things just form the bond. That has been very critical for me. Another thing of the support system that I've had to learn is that just because you share neighborhoods, schools, work, industry with people, doesn't mean you share value systems. So I used to send my children, if you ask, because I was overwhelmed. So if you ask for my children, I would send them to your house in a jiffy. Because they had the kids, you should bring them. Okay, they're on the way. You know, like, it was out the door. And I thought I was helping them socialize. I mean, but I've learned you really have to be the source of values, source of love for your children. Support systems are there. So I'm lucky to have a nanny back. My sister's been very great. My small brother's been great. General family, but you have to have the core. You have to have somebody in your support system must have the same values. Otherwise, you always, every time your child hangs out with them, you're always retweaking your child back to what they were in the original. So that's been the kind of journey in that.
Moffat, to you now. These gentlemen have very powerful stories and they're strong. They're here, they're sharing these stories. Their children are looking at them, and you know, the question that lies therein is it okay to mourn? Is it okay for your children to know that you're still in this period where you intensely miss or are deeply wounded over the loss of your loved one? As you continue with your healing process as well, does this ultimately affect the children who have also lost their mother or their father, for those who have lost their fathers?
Thank you very much, Lillian, for that question. And I want to begin by saluting these two gentlemen, because I am trying to imagine what this really means to you, and imagining what I would do if I was in your place. And I can just say, you know, I salute you. Now, when it comes to the issue of grieving and mourning, and I must begin by saying that I was called for this show when I had just received the news of the demise of my sister in India, who has just left her husband and 2 children. This is what I want to say. It is very, very important for everybody to mourn, because we mourn in different ways. The way we feel pain, even if people are twins, you don't feel pain the same way. Then I also want to say that mourning and grieving is a process, and nobody should hurry you through that process. Now, when it comes to children, sometimes we do not know that even our children mourn and they grieve, you know, regardless of their age. Whether I have heard you say that your child was left when she was barely 3 months. And we normally say that for a mother, the relationship or the attachment between a mother and a child is naturally given. But when it comes to us men, we really have to cultivate for it. And I really commend you for what you have done. Now, it is very, very important for children to mourn, and it is very important even for the caregivers to mourn their way. And it doesn't hurt for even your children to know that you are mourning, because they feel that you are walking the same journey, and they mourn, you know, their own way. And for them to be able to bring that finality of death, it is very, very important for them to understand what is happening, in their lives. And by so doing, you will realize that they will even stop asking such questions like, where did my mother go? Can I go to her? And that shows you that these are children who have not yet, had a closure as far as death is concerned.
So like George is saying, just be open about what it is that happened. Whenever the children ask the questions, be honest about the fact that your mother actually passed away.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Ted, you have chosen, I'll come back to you, you have chosen to go the social media route, and every milestone of Jay's life, Gummy Bear's life, is captured on your Instagram. I follow you, so right. she's really cute, by the way. Your decision to do that, is that a healing strategy for you? Why did you choose to go the Instagram way with baby?
Initially, nobody knew about my relationship at all, and we had kept it private intentionally, because when you're a celebrity in this country, people like to tear everything down, you know. And when my wife passed, I thought to myself, this wasn't meant to be a secret forever. And Jay is not a secret. Gummy Bear is not a secret. So I'm going to let people know just how much her mom loved her and how much I love her. And I'm going to walk this journey with people. One, not just to grieve, but also to... A lot of fathers may have their wives alive, but they're not involved in their children's lives, you know, at all. Because, you know, it's the noble thing to go out and earn a living. It's the noble thing to go out and make the money and leave that responsibility of child rearing to, you know, your spouse or your caregiver or whoever it is. And I thought, no, let's do this different. I don't know a thing about you. You have no idea about me, but let's just help each other through this process and figure it out as we go. And if somebody somewhere is touched by what they see, I hope that, especially for the men, they change their perception, especially African men. We need to start changing our perception about being hands-on with our children.
Has this experience changed you? Were you as this hands-on? I don't know if you have other children.
Not at all. Not at all. I was so not hands-on. In fact, we come from a generation, I tell people this, my father and his generation were not very tactile. Think about it. When did your father ever give you a hug or say, hey son, I love you, or hey daughter, I love you? It didn't happen because they were coming from a generation where people didn't touch each other. That was like, whoa, you know. So we are in transition. We are in a generation where people see people touching and hugging each other on television. They see people from Europe in these sitcoms and stuff, and they see the father being involved in the child's relationship, you know, and we don't have that. And I thought to myself, no, it's time to really change that focus. This is a little girl. I am sure I can bring this little girl up almost as good as a lady could, you know, almost, not fully, because obviously there are things that she's going to have to be taught by her grandmothers, you know, which used to happen in African society. The customs and things that she's going to have to understand from a woman's perspective and not from a man's perspective. But I really wanted to be involved hands-on, and I wanted to show that to the world. You know, let us try and be the men who, as you said, one day you say, I'm going to do the cooking, I'm going to make the breakfast, let's figure out how to make the breakfast. Even if you flop at it, it'll be funny, but it'll be a funny experience that the child will remember for years to come. You know, and it's those memories that you want to cherish. So that's why.
Well said, Ted. George, to you, society dictating acceptable periods of grief and imagining that, you know, giving you a time frame for when you should move on, really. For you, and I just want to go back to the question of opportunists and the fact that, you know, life has to go on at the end of the day. For you, as a man, in a society that dictates that men should be strong and that, you know, you can go to the pub and take a pint and just really, you know, sit there with your boys and forget all your troubles. For you, this period of healing and grieving, what has this taught you about society and how we deal with grief and how people ideally expect us to handle such situations?
I'll answer from the end. I think people don't understand grieving. I was just telling when we were waiting for the interview that personally I'll never tell anyone RIP or be strong. I think those are the most nonsensical words you could ever tell anyone who's lost someone, because they mean nothing. They're really very... We don't understand grieving because death is a taboo in our society, and we don't really speak about what exactly could you be going through. In terms of expectations of society, I personally never believe in what I call the Abu Nuwas theory. You can never really please the gallery. There are people who I met a gentleman recently who remarried in a month. I met another one who, when his wife passed, his other wife was giving birth in the same hospital. I have met somebody who's done 20 years. I've talked to a lot of them. I've met people who've done 2 years. I've done what I personally think when there are children involved. My biggest lesson is that before you bring anyone on board, if ever you do, form a bond with the children that is so tight that any third party or person joining you is joining a unit. And that way it will never be a problem, because she will step into a role and she will realize because usually what happens is there is no bond, it will become high and new. And she will not stand on this side and the children's side. She'll stand in between. And the children will start to hate you for having brought somebody in between them. So before you allow anyone in, you have to do those things we are talking about.
Do you feel like it's too soon to be even thinking in that direction?
Everyone is different.
Yeah.
I personally think everyone is different. I have sat with a man who, as I said, his wife passed, and he explained to me, we're all really different. It's like the same way when people get married. There are people who date for 6 months and have a fantastic marriage. There are people who date for 6 years before they have a fantastic marriage. It's really different for everyone. I think if you have children, don't really mind about if you bump into somebody who is right for you, make sure first you bonded with the children. If you bond with the children strong enough, then that person adds themselves to this ecosystem, and then it's never a problem. So spend a lot of energy and time. That's my experience. I think I'm really not concerned because there are no time limits. And on the other hand, us men are really kind of shortchanged. Ted will tell you.
I don't get.
We are really shortchanged in terms of nurturing. Because naturally, when Janet was around, I would land home and ask, what are the bills? Where are the kids? I'm the fun guy who they sit on the lap, and I don't care whether they are showered, washed, brushed their teeth. I don't know those things. For me, I'm always presented shiny, oily baby. Sit here, I tickle them, and when they see me, they know they can ask for whatever toy or trinket they can. Now you're a nurturer. So, and I'm not saying everyone can nurture. And sometimes, if you can nurture, it's you to say, look, I'm going to bring in somebody to do this. But don't bring in somebody to replace the love. You got to do the love, and then bring in someone. And if you've already had that relationship with children, you want to do it the next. I personally think it's really on an individual by individual basis.
Wow, Ted, for you?
I don't even know how to answer that question. At this particular point, there are a lot of opportunists. Yeah, obviously, being on social media, you can't tell who's genuine and who's not genuine. And I, first of all, want to focus on the genuine love I have for my little girl, and make sure that my little girl never thinks my father did not love me enough. Full stop. That is my driving force at this particular point. So if somebody comes into the unit, I mean, obviously the Bible also does say, he who finds a wife has found a good thing. But that doesn't mean that all women who are going to come into your life are wives who are good things, you know. So you have to be very discerning, you have to be very prayerful about it, and you also have a responsibility that's coming. If you bring in somebody who's got extreme negative energy, it's going to drain your energy. You are not going to be able to love your children, no matter how strong you are, you know. So you've got to make sure that anybody who's coming around you, anyone, it doesn't even have to be an intimate relationship, just a nanny, anyone who's coming in has to not drain any energy, but be there to support. They are not the pillar. You are the pillar, but they have to play that supporting role. And if you find that the people around you are draining your energy, get rid of them. Because then your child is losing love. Your child is losing you. And very small things can trigger stress. I found out a couple of weeks ago that I'm beginning to fall ill because of the stress that I've been putting onto myself.
Are you seeing someone, Ted? You seem very well put together in terms of your thought process and where you should direct your energies right now. But who is walking you through this? walking you through those moments where you have questions? You've said that spirituality has played a very important role throughout this period. But aside from that, who's walking you through this?
I'll be very frank with you. There's once I had a conversation with somebody, and they said, please don't ask the question why. God is all-knowing. And at that particular point, I blocked them. Because the one question I want to know consistently on a daily basis is why. Why? I wasn't drunk in a pub. I wasn't doing any infidelity or anything. I was working and loving a woman with all my heart. Why? You know? Why now? Why this? Why me? And I have those conversations with God in a very honest position. Sometimes with Jay, in the presence of Jay, sometimes alone. But it's part of my healing process. Because when I get to understand them, then I become a better person and I can walk a better journey. I just need to walk a better journey so that the child has a better father. But if who's giving me the knowledge, it must be God. Because the one thing I tell people is, please, even if you can't visit, even if you feel like, you know, you want to buy a present, don't buy the gift. We don't really need the gifts. What we need is prayer. Okay. Because prayer has changed, and I have so many people on social media. That is the one thing that, you know, amazes me more than anything. 90% of the people on social media come into my inbox to say, we're praying for you.
Good one. Dr. Moffat, so I'm going to get your final remarks, gentlemen, but before that, Moffat, in conclusion, we've heard from these gentlemen that, you know, George specifically said he doesn't like to hear the word RAP. A lot of guys here saying they don't like to hear the word it will be well. Ted here talking about the question why. So for the fathers, for the single parents who have lost their wives in these unprecedented circumstances, for you counselors, you know, with avoidance of looking like you're literally reading from the script and telling somebody something that's really not going to give them any balm for their hurting hearts, what would be your closing remarks to that viewer that's watching and really relating to these stories, to these powerful stories tonight, in terms of moving on and healing and coming to terms with the reality of the fact that this has happened?
Thank you. Now, I want to say that again, like I said, nobody should hurry you through the process of death, or rather grief, and that is very, very important. And another thing I want to say is that talking of the people who want to come in and fill that gap, I like saying that it is important for you to make sure that you are not shielding yourself or insulating yourself against that pain. It is important for you to go through it, face it the way it is, because it is until you do that that you will get total recovery. Another thing, we think that our children do not understand, even when we want to bring in someone. I was dealing with a very interesting case of similar nature, whereby a gentleman wants to get married, and as a counselor I had to call them. I did a session with them together with the lady, and the last session I had to do with the children. And what amazed me is that those children had never mourned their late mother. Therefore, this was a process again to help them come to terms with that. And I always like saying that children are fully grown human beings, only that they are clothed in children's body. They do understand. It is important for them to come to the picture, because unless you expose yourself to that pain and you allow yourself to go through it, then it means that even if you are going to have someone, you will become what I call, that relationship will become what I call paracetamol relationship, because you want to shield yourself against pain. And therefore it is very, very important for you to go through that process. Again, probably the last point I would also wish to say that we come from a culture that is somehow so disadvantaged, whereby when we were growing up as men, as small children, we were told, boys don't cry. You see, when you fall and when you do something and you're hurting, boys don't cry. And what that means is that men are supposed to suppress emotions. They are not supposed to express who they are. And I think at this particular point, when you are going through process, it is important for you to work with people who are able to validate what you are going through. And that is why even something like rest in peace, and I understand, these are some of the things that we also don't use in counseling profession, because I cannot understand your pain, and I would be lying to tell you that I understand what you are going through. Probably the most important thing for you to do is to have a support group that is able to help you cope with what you are going through. People who are willing to validate your pain, and the moment your pain is validated, you will realize that now you will become even very objective, even in your future relationships. Yes.
Thanks for that. We're closing now. So for you, George, a lot of men are writing in and saying, wow, this is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of single fathers out there who are really hurting and who are also asking the whys, and who are, grappling with the everyday life of raising their children on their own. So they're saying, thank you, very informative interview. George, for you, what has worked for you? Has it been a year yet?
Yeah, been 9 months. April 1st.
Okay, yeah. So for you, a year on, just looking at that camera and talking to that gentleman out there who's perhaps listening to you, because only you can relate perhaps to what he's going through, because he's gone through a similar experience. What has worked for you, one step at a time, to this point that you're sitting in the studio and sharing this story? What has helped you get here in terms of healing? And going forward, what you think would work for that gentleman as well?
Okay. For me, the biggest realization is that there are a lot of us dads out there who are not being dads. And while a situation like mine and Ted's may be a bit more pronounced in terms of our dear loved wives are gone, there are a lot of us who are living in pain while you're still in marriage. There are a lot of divorced dads. There are a lot of separated dads. And my challenge and my realization in this journey is that we as men have to step up in our role in our kids. And when I look at it, I realize that it is extremely difficult for your children to be everything that you ever want them to be if you as a father don't step up. And so my cry is to all the dads, first, be the rock for your kids. Be the source of love. Don't be the source of finances. We actually imagine that your children will remember that you paid fees. What your children would remember was the day they cooked breakfast with you. Those are the memories your kids will carry and will influence how they live their adult life. It is not the fact that you had a car with big rims. We need to grow up as men in our society. I think that's very. And for the single dads, I would say, don't despair. You are changing a full generation. It is for you to look at these children and be the role model. And by role model is not by simply what you give your children, is by who you are in their eyes. Be the friend, be the mentor, be in the way you carry yourself, and be you. And I always say do you. I don't think there's a script in terms of who you should be in society. I think do a lot of you. A challenge I always throw to parents in closing is, most of us, if you are asked what you want your child to be in 30 years, very few of us are going to say a doctor, a surgeon, or they're going to say, I want them to be confident, articulate, expressive, and loving. And they can only learn that from you. Stop trying to make your child into a profession. Be those attributes to your child.
Thanks for that, George. In other words, be present. For you, Ted, clearly you're very present in Jay's life. Every single day I see you post a video or a photo of her. You're very proud of her and very excited about her. For you as well, one day at a time, what it's taken, what it's continuing to take for you to get to that place where perhaps one day you might say, I'm okay, I'm better. What has worked for you so far? You've talked about spirituality. But for that viewer who is watching and relating to your story, walk them through their pain and share with them what it's taken for you to get to this point where you actually told me before the interview that you felt ready to actually come and share about this experience.
It's a day at a time. Every day you wake up and you might wake up on the wrong side of the bed. It's okay. Cry, scream, shout, yell. Do whatever you need to do to get by through the day. Try your level best not to fall into vices, because it's very easy to, you know, start the blame game internally, and then all of a sudden you fall into alcohol, drug abuse, or, you know, even just relationship abuse or whatever it is. You need to remember that yes, you're a parent, but I don't think you ever stop growing until the day you die. Growth is consistent. You know, we learn new things every day about ourselves. I think to myself, the one memory of my dad that I have when I was very young was when I was 5 years old, and we went for dinner how we normally did every Friday evening. I fell asleep in the car, and my dad carried me to the house. He doesn't even know that I remember that. I was only 5. For me, that was the most comforting thing. I think I even cheated I was sleeping so that I could feel that comfort. For children, you must be there for them and hold them and love them. For yourself, let yourself go through the motions. They are motions. You will have good days, you will have bad days. But guess what? If you're confident in yourself, you will have days, and make sure those days count for something, because we all need you, not just your kids. There's so many people around you who do love you. Sometimes they don't know how to say, hey, I love you, I know what you're going through, because you don't want to hear those words at that particular point. What you want to hear is, maybe you want to punch them. They won't let you punch them. Just let them be there for you. Let your friends love you in the way they know how to love you, because they will help with the healing process.
Thanks for that. And finally, Moffat, how people can reach you? There's a lot of questions here which we really can't tackle tonight because we're closing. But a lot of guys who are going through this, who actually say they need the services of a professional counselor, are asking how they can reach you.
We are on Facebook, Procare Counselors. And I also call myself Honorable Moffat Mshauri. And also my phone number is 0721 66 38 48. 0721 66 38 48.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And guys, you've been sending in your questions, so as we close, we're going to take your tweets and your messages as well here on 22422. Are we ready with the tweets? Yes, we are. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the SMSs. And Harriet is saying, hi Lillian, thanks for the program today on single parenting. I lost my husband when our son was only 11 months in the year 2002, but here we are, thanking God. Kudos to the two gentlemen. Thanks, Harriet. Irene from Raqqa, you're saying the conversation is very touching because my mom died when I was 13 and my sis was 15. My dad literally took care of us by cooking and washing for us. It's been 13 years now, and I am so proud of my dad. He is my hero. Somebody saying, this is Purity Mombasa. Kudos to those single fathers. I salute you. I know, since I'm a single mother of 2, I thank God because my daughter graduated last year and my son is in Form 4, and the journey has not been easy. Joe, you're saying, I've been a single father since 2016. My wife died of liver cancer. I was very close to my 4 boys when their mom was alive. It became easy to cope with the situation because I talk to my children and we encourage one another. Thanks for that, Joe. On Twitter? Let's see what you're saying. Miss Patricia, may God bless these great men. It must be difficult to be a single father in such situations. Lynn, you're saying single parenting is hard. At times you burn out, and it's harder when it's a man. Emmy, George and Ted, may the good Lord give you strength and wisdom to raise the little angels. And finally, Ian Amulega, I am touched with the inspiring talk on Monday special from Ted Josiah and George Ikua. Single parenting is not an easy task. It requires God's mercies and having a big heart. We thank you so much for your time. We thank you for your feedback. To you, George Ikua, thank you so very much for agreeing to come to this interview and for sharing your story so candidly. We celebrate you, we appreciate you, and indeed you're in our prayers. Thank you very much for coming. And he's a very good friend of mine as well. And also with us is Ted Josiah. Thank you very much, Ted, for sharing your story, and all our prayers to you, blessings to you, and indeed it's such an honor finally to meet you. You're a super producer. I was telling Ted that my producer Alex Murungi will probably be having a conversation on music production within subsequent shows. We celebrate you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. And to you, Dr. Moffat, we thank you as well for your insights into this matter. For everybody that's watched Monday Special KE, let's keep the conversation going. A lot of women are also saying they're in a similar situation. We'll find a date for you as well. Thanks for sharing each of your stories here on 22422. That's all the time we had for now. You can catch both gentlemen on their respective social media platforms, Ted Josiah and George Ikua, and indeed Moffat Cargo here, who is a counselor. Thanks so much for your time. My name is Lillian Muli. Good night. Gosh, it gets hot in here.